All right. Hello. Welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another and my beautiful sister and friend, Jess Maitri. So, hello, Jess.
Hi.
We thought we'd pop on here. I mean, for a few reasons. Gosh, we could talk about so much, but I wanted to share my experience that I'd had with Jess. So Jess is a therapist. She does yoga and therapy, and so many other things. She's an intuitive, and we just have a lot of fun together.
Me too. Type 2 fun.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to maybe go in. Will you share a little bit about what you do? Like just a little quick intro. The reason we're on here is because I had a cool, awesome brain spotting session with Jess on Monday. And I really wanted to share with everybody about my experience. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about just the energies that we're all experiencing and how, everybody's kind of been feeling and navigating with what's going on in our world a little bit too. So we'll kind of roll all of that in, a little energy update, talk a little bit about brain spotting, talk a little bit about embodiment, and just, weave it all in.
Mhm. So yeah, in a nutshell, what I do or what I'm passionate about is blending psychology and clinical therapy with holistic mind, body, soul, spirit modalities. And that looks like things like brain spotting. It looks like yoga therapy. It looks like dance and movement therapy. It looks like, um, intuitive sessions and uh, all of that. That's my shtick.
Yeah, speaking my language.
Yeah, totally.
So, one of the cool things, so Jess and I just kind of did a trade because we like to help each other out and work with each other and explore this whole. And I love exploring new modalities, I guess, to just kind of see how it weaves in with my own work and my own life. But this is something that was brand new to me. I'd never done the therapy. I never had a therapy session ever in my life. And I thought it'd be really fun to try it. So, Jess, do you want to share a little bit about what brain spotting is? And then I just want to before you do that, I just want to share that the energies this week have been so strong. They kind of knocked me on my butt. And I think you've been feeling it, and a lot of us have been feeling it. And what happens is I just want to share that it's important from my perspective to just keep on keeping on.
Yeah, one foot in front of the other. Yep. Mhm.
Yeah, because when you do this kind of work, which doesn't feel like you're doing work, but you
Yeah.
are. It's
Kind of
very,
tricky. It's
yeah,
backdoor gets you in the backdoor work,
yeah,
like
yeah.
sneaky.
It's very sneaky. I'm
Yeah.
gonna give a couple comparisons. One is like when you're in yoga and you're in pigeon pose.
Totally. And it's like you get hit with a whoa.
Yeah, so we're gonna say for me, the brain spotting was like an hour-long pigeon pose.
That's perfect.
So for those of you who aren't you haven't done yoga before and done specifically like yin yoga. So I'm a yoga instructor as well. And I do intuitive work and all of that. But for me, the combination that you have with your therapy and the yoga and all of your techniques is just so really powerful and I think helpful. And in some cases, might I suggest necessary for some of us to navigate all of the stuff that's coming in. And so you haven't done yoga before. I mean, if you hold a pose for a really long time that's centered, let's say, around the hips, which hold the emotions, and et cetera, all of a sudden, for some people, they just start crying and don't know why, right?
Yep.
And it's like the body's been holding on to stuff. And just so I would venture to say that's the body. But then as it turns out, the brain is holding on to stuff as well.
Yeah.
And so maybe from there, so the brain spotting to me was like uh, just very unexpected.
Yeah. So I'll jump in on that to share. That's like a perfect example is So just briefly to explain how the brain works, you've got your prefrontal cortex, which is all about reasoning and logic and like problem solving and future planning. And it's where most of us spend all of our time. And that can be tricky because we think that we're doing the work. This is where talk therapy happens. Like,
Yeah.
if I talk about it enough and if I understand it and make a plan and all the things, then I'm doing the work, right? And not to say that's not true, but what brain spotting does is it bypasses all of that logic and reasoning and plan, because that can actually be a defense mechanism to get in the way of feeling what you actually need to feel. And
Yeah.
so it bypasses this, gets down into what they call the midbrain, which is also your really your brainstem. And
Yeah.
that's so if you think about how we developed as a fetus from the brainstem up. And
Yeah.
so if you're trying to heal, we have to start where we started, which is going back to the root. And so that was Carrie was saying is like all this stuff in that pigeon pose of brain spotting, all of a sudden all the real stuff starts to come up
Yeah.
beyond logic and reasoning that's been bypassed.
Yeah. And so this isn't to take away from talk therapy or to take away from yoga. It's really just an additional bonus because from my perspective, again, I'd never really done talk therapy or participated in it. And this is nothing like talk therapy. It isn't at
Mhm.
all.
Mhm.
Although we talk and you know, everybody's experience I'm sure is very different and unique to their own personal body and their own personal, you know, how they work through things. For me, I'm very curious in nature. And so when I'm experiencing something, I like to share it because I think it's valuable for whoever I'm working with, but also it's valuable just to kind of bring that up and plant it into the field, so to speak, so that it can be, well, it's ironic that it was almost like working backwards.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I would imagine talk therapy is you talk about it and then you work through it. Whereas this, you don't talk about anything. And all of a sudden you feel like talking about stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Or
And
not. Yeah.
well, talk therapy, you're not getting into the body at all or the nervous system, which is where everything actually needs to unwind.
Yeah.
So,
And I
yeah.
love the fact that you were saying too about feeling because we talk about this a lot. And, you know, in my writing, like my guides are like, feel, you have to feel. But
Mhm.
there is a separation, a sense of sometimes disembodiment, we'll say, where
Mhm.
you're not able to feel sometimes and you don't know why, even if you talk about it, even if you do yoga, it's like, oh, I felt that for a second, but it was gone. So I mean, there's just I want to point this out because I feel like there's so many different ways. Every person is unique and every person has potentially a different way that they are that might, let's say, activate them more than another particular style or modality.
Right.
So the more you know toys you have in your toolbox,
Right.
and the more you experience some. So for me, I'm just going to share a little bit about my experience, if that's okay.
Oh,
So basically, Jess, you had me just kind of look in a particular direction. Now, for me, it was easy to drop in. But I'm already I intuitively use my body to feel things.
yeah.
So that was really interesting though, because you want to share like a little bit about how you direct people first?
Sure. Yeah.
Um,
Just so they understand what you're talking about. So I
yeah,
use this little pointer if people can see it and it extends. It looks, it literally extends out as long as I want it to. Anyways, and then we find the spot that is directly associated with that person's, we'll call it a trigger or something they want to work through. So some people they have a spot like up here or even off screen. They might have a spot that's higher, lower, to the right or the left, sometimes forward and back. We didn't really get there with you, Carrie, but yeah, so we find the spot that their body feels activation around whatever they're working with, and then we have them open that by staring at it. And what we did is we found the file in their brain that was connected to the trigger. And as you continue to look at that spot, you're inviting it to open and unwind and empty out.
yeah, I love that. And so because I've done so much work, I don't have any triggers.
Me neither. I'm perfect with that.
want to say, I mean, I'm totally joking, of course, but I'm like, the things that, I'm bringing this up because, the work that you and I do, sometimes we have a tendency to think ourselves or people that we work with are like, I've done so much work, I don't need to do this. Or why does this stuff keep coming up after
Oh,
all the
I hear that all the time. There's something about expectations that we have as a collective, like it's supposed to be done at some point, and it doesn't
yeah,
work like that.
yeah. So I know it is, and it's interesting because, and in my experience, the things that were came up, I just want to point out to you, I was aware that those things were things. Most of them, some of them, I was surprised by, but I was surprised at the fact that I was aware that they were there. So sometimes we think we've done the work around them, but
Mm,
that doesn't necessarily mean that the trigger isn't still there for
yeah,
whatever reason.
yeah, totally.
And it was
Agree.
subtle. So for me, I looked in one particular direction. The trigger was, you pick a subject, whatever it might be. It can be abundance, it can be feeling unworthy, it could be, or that's actually a layer that you may not even realize is why you're triggered by what you're triggered by. I mean,
Hmm.
it could be something, let's start backwards a little bit because I'm going into depth, but it could be that you're triggered by your family
Hmm.
or triggered by politics, or you're angry and you just aren't sure why this person irritates you so much. I could go on and on. Whatever it is, you pick a trigger. And then as I was looking at this spot, I loved it, did feel like an unwinding was happening. So
Yeah.
I have experience in cranial sacral therapy, and the workshops that I've been through, it felt very similar to
Mm.
having a cranial sacral therapy session just from, and so the other thing is, so Jess holds this beautiful space. If you're sensitive to that energy, intuitively it felt like you were just kind of wrapping your arms around me and
Hmm.
holding that space. Doesn't necessarily mean that's what everybody's going to feel, but I'm going to share as an intuitive, that's exactly what it felt like.
Yeah.
And so you feel, it seems silly that you would want to stare off into this one spot, and my brain, I think I was moving around a little bit, and you had mentioned that some people actually, that wasn't avoidance, but what did you call it? Like, oh, I'm hiding.
Yeah, we all have ways that we hide from feeling.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm gonna look over here. No, I'm gonna look over here. No, I'm gonna look over here.
Yeah, you're like, this one feels really good. I feel really good here. Like, well, then we should probably go somewhere else.
So for me, as I was looking at the spot,
Yeah,
it felt, the way that I described it to you, Jess, was it felt stuck.
yeah, yeah, totally,
All of a sudden, I didn't feel like I felt uncomfortable a little bit.
totally, yeah.
But then she had me stare at this spot, and I kept getting more and more uncomfortable.
Hmm. Yeah, which is your
Yeah,
nervous system hitting an edge, right? And then
yeah,
and the reason it's so important, like, it's so funny from the outside, people are like, well, you didn't really do anything. I'm like, you have no idea what I just did. Like, because if I'm not actually, I'm actually plugging into the nervous system energetically of
yeah,
the other person so that you can borrow my nervous system for a little bit while you process. That's literally what's happening. So
yeah,
it is a big space to hold, and there's a
yeah.
lot happening.
Well, I think even said that. I'm like, you get paid to do this?
Yeah, I
That's
know. Yeah. Right. And people are like, well, that's easy. You're not doing anything. I'm like, oh boy.
yeah, but I could feel it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
for me, it literally feels like it's almost like a form of quantum healing in essence,
Yeah.
from my experience. So, we all have a different style. So, if, for example, if I'm doing energy work on someone, I might be moving my hands or pulling out threads, or it was almost like, the way that I can describe it is, you zoned in, right? And you wrapped the energy field around in this really safe bubble.
Hmm.
And then what I felt was almost like being held in place. Like I
Yes.
couldn't move.
Yeah.
I could, I had total control over it, but intuitively I was like, something is going on here and I'm
Yeah.
being worked on.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you're being worked on by you and my guides and, you know, everything.
Yeah.
So it felt like all of a sudden the back of my skull, right back at the brain, started doing this womp, 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 womp.
Yeah.
And it felt highly uncomfortable in the sense of I felt squirmy, like I wanted to get out of that position. And you just instructed me to keep holding it, keep holding it, keep holding it. And then all of a sudden, guys, stuff comes up. Thoughts,
Yeah.
Memories, emotions, though, which I think is key because that's the part where you're feeling stuff.
Yep.
And it was a really powerful experience because I had these, you start to, and I'm going to put together a couple things because I'm still integrating this.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking that like even this is helping integrate. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I think is something important to talk about because sometimes we think, how often have we had, well, I could use an intuitive session. And how often have you, like, you've had someone that you do an intuitive session with and they're like, yeah, I don't really know. Thanks. I'm not really sure.
And then everything changed.
Yeah, you get an email from them like a week later. Oh my God, guess what happened? You
Yeah.
know, or I didn't think about this, but then this synchronicity happened and I could go on and on. Or me doing anytime we get work on ourselves and we kind of push it off to the side like it wasn't something.
Yeah.
This wasn't one of those experiences.
Yeah.
Although I wanted to think that it was so simple.
Right.
That it felt too simple.
Totally. Yep.
But
totally.
it was very deep.
Yep. Totally.
And that's what this is how this works. So for me, the unwinding that happened really was uncomfortable. And then I would just have this emotion come up. And once that came through, it almost feels like,
yeah, it unwound.
I didn't even realize that that thing that I was aware of, that I've already worked on, still had some type of hold in my nervous system, is what it felt like.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And I like to use the example of like when animals come together and they have a tiff and they shake it off and they're literally done. It's because they shake it off. We don't. So we hold all of this stuff for like years and years in our nervous system.
Yeah.
So
yeah, yeah, and I hadn't realized. And then it continued. And so what I'll share, the next thing that I noticed is, so for me, I'll just share personally. So everybody who's watched these videos before, we're seeing Jess and I have done videos in the past. I do intuitive work and Jess does too. And so I can work with people who have passed on. I have mediumship skills. I'm working intuitively with people in their bodies. And we have a lot of similar style. But I think that what happens is, and I know you feel this way too, Jess, mine was I feel blocked around what am I blocking myself in? So even though I can do all of these things, I still didn't feel like I was really at my optimum potential. Right. And also around abundance, which I think is really important to bring up. I'm just being very candid. And by the way, abundance doesn't have to be money. It can be anything. Love, happiness, feeling abundant. Yep. And not feeling like you're lacking something. So by the way, that was a aha that I had that I made also afterwards, let me go a little deeper, meaning my connection was part of why I felt like I might be blocking myself was because of that feeling of not enough. Interesting. Directly related with abundance. Totally. Yeah. And so for me, guys, I had something that this started off in one part and then it led to another spot. Yeah. And it started off with many childhood things around the age of 6 and 7. Yeah. Which, by the way, is important for a lot of people. I'm sure with therapy, how would you, do you want to share a little bit about that age?
I would say that's before the age of 8 is when most of the imprinting happens. Actually, sooner than that, but definitely by the age of 8, like most of your imprinting is done.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that's important because here I am looking at stuff I processed and then I went back to being a 7-year-old and having this situation with a parent. And then what happened is it led me to another memory that was the origination of the feeling of not being enough or having enough or whatever it might be. And there were so many different reasons. It wasn't just one reason.
Yeah.
But the root led me to memories that I basically forgotten about, as well as, something maybe scary happened when I was a kid with my mediumship that we haven't even explored yet.
Yeah.
That was multiple layers that I was not expecting.
Right.
So that was, yeah.
So no wonder you need to still integrate, right? Like that's why I don't usually do one-off sessions with people. It's not like responsible, honestly.
Yeah.
Or, because people do need to integrate. And it takes a little bit, takes a couple weeks sometimes.
Yeah, the cool thing too, Jess, I could see about like an additional value to what you do, what you bring to the table, because I just want to share the question I'd had. I had a client who was asking me, because I've been sharing this with everybody because I'm so excited. I mean, it's just so cool. And she said, well, what's the difference? We talked about this, but she said, well, what's the difference between your intuitive sessions and what your friend is doing? Well, you do also intuitive sessions, but in this particular case, the way that I described it was, in an intuitive session, I am going into the field and I am sharing with them, with my client, you're sharing with your client, what we are seeing in the field, what we are, and therefore we're interpreting these symbols, words, sounds, and energies to then maybe it leads me into asking them questions, giving them an account of what I'm seeing, and then they can take that and extrapolate from that whatever they will. With what you're doing, the client is the one that's actually doing the discovery.
Yes, I love that.
You're just holding this beautiful space. And so that's the difference between like an intuitive reading. You call yours insight sessions. I just call mine intuitive readings, but that's the difference between that and, let's say, brain spotting.
Yeah.
It's like you're discovering through your own emotions that are coming up. I'm the one that saw the pictures. You didn't tell me what you were seeing.
Exactly. Well, and I just to kind of piggyback on that, I was telling Carrie that I've been playing with some clients that I have a good rapport with and that we're already doing intuitive work with. This is part of how I'm teaching them now how to access their own intuition, is to find their own brain spot through how I help them to find that spot. And then they know that that's the spot that they can access their own channel. And I've had a couple clients now, like literally channel answers for themselves.
Yeah.
From their higher self. Or like they'll be like, my guide is over here. And if I look here, I access this guide. And if I look here, I access this guide.
I love that. And that kind of came up for me too. I already know when I'm doing my videos, you guys might notice I look to the right a lot.
Yeah.
Like that's where I go when I'm going into that space. And sometimes I'll move.
Totally.
But I have a tendency to do that. So I already felt that. So it really doesn't surprise me that my eyes were up here when I had the block or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And also you had mentioned sometimes they're down, or it's different for everyone.
Yep. Yeah.
Now I love the fact that you're bringing up intuition, because sometimes people have this common misconception that once you're intuitive, we're all intuitive, but let's say once you have your intuition up and running, once you're able to channel, once you're able to do light language, whatever it might be, oh, you're a medium, you must have all the answers.
Oh my God. Right. Wouldn't that be nice?
Kind of share clearly, I know a lot of things, but I could always, there's so much I'm not able to see around myself. Right?
Oh,
that's
yeah.
the thing I wanted to add that's beautiful about this is I could help other people all day long, but this is going to help me really even fine tune helping myself in a completely different way.
Totally.
But as you said, it also, I wanted to do it further access a deeper level of my intuition.
Totally, totally. I love that. And I think it, as we heal those, we'll call them spots or files, literally as we heal one of those, the next time, if you like, if you were to do another session and we tried to find the spot for, let's say, the abundance issue, my guess
Yeah.
is it would be a different spot now. If it was even a spot.
Yeah. And can we talk about that a little bit? Do you have any
Sure.
thoughts on why that would be a different spot?
I
What
think
does that?
the way that I see it, and again, this isn't like from my training, this is more intuitively, but I feel like everything, like a ball of yarn, let's say the brain, it's like everything
Yeah.
really is connected. So once you, let's say we identify the biggest door or file, and when you open the door and you clean it out and it's almost like that part of the yarn unwinds, but it gives you access to the next one.
Yeah.
And then it's like that one, the second one wasn't available because this one was blocking it. So it's almost like it's the onion that's never ending healing. That makes sense.
Oh, I love that. You know, it's interesting too, Jess, is I've written about DNA,
Mm,
and I haven't quite unfolded, no pun intended,
unwound. Yeah.
unwound. But the guides, when I write, they talk about the folds of the brain.
Yeah.
And what they talk about is exactly what you just described. And what
Mm,
they showed me in is that when you open up these folds, and also similarly to DNA, you know, one of the things I've written about and spoken about are jumping genes
mm,
that jump, and they actually jump and attach themselves to another part of the DNA. And then
mm,
that creates, anyways, that's a whole other story. But what I've been shown is, and this is just a maybe even not literal, but that the folds of the brain are like an alphabet. And so, like what you're describing are these letters get, and they get scrambled. So
mhm.
then once you pull out the letters, you can reorganize them like Scrabble, and then reform your words is what how they describe it. And I know that's a play on words, but
Yeah. No, I think, and then they're able to get reorganized. You know, I think of like those deep ruts in the brain, right? Like the neuro pathways that
yeah,
was, oh, this is just what I do. This is what I do. And it's like, this gives an opportunity to start making new ones from a deeper space, not just
yeah.
from trying
Um,
hard.
and then what happens is when I was when so at the next level, I'd say part of my integration, and I feel like this is fun to share because I think sometimes going back to what we were originally speaking on is that sometimes people skip the integration part.
Mhm.
It's not that you're not integrating, it's that you're not aware of it maybe as much. And sometimes being aware of the integration is really makes it even more powerful.
So true. So true. I think a good, I'll use a personal example, but like when I went to this training, um, for 3 days straight, we were doing our own brain spotting. We were practicing on each other, things like that. And I would say like the 2 weeks following that training, I did not have as many triggers in my relationship. And I was like, wow, we must just be doing really well. You know, like I don't really know what happened. I don't know what shifted. Right. And
Yeah.
it's literally an example of like how the brain, this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex is like, well, there's no logical explanation. So we must just be doing better. Instead of
So
it being, no, something really did happen.
yeah, I
Yeah.
know. I had similarly with my husband and his health situation. He had jokingly said the other day, because I shared this on video about cancer and then it disappeared. He's like, well, where did it go? Like, it must not have been there in the first place. I'm like, so it's kind of like that thing where we just gloss over, like, oh
Yeah.
no, it couldn't have been because I did this, that, and this.
Right.
It
Exactly.
must. So it's almost like we make things, part of that might be a little bit of a survival mechanism too.
Yeah.
I did the same thing when I did cranial sacral, 3 days that workshop. I think I was still integrating, months later, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had some things that happened right away though. So, for me, I do this. I've been doing this for years. I share all my stuff on YouTube. I have sessions that I do on YouTube. Currently, I'm mostly just doing my referrals and local. So for you, Jess, you're in Idaho.
Yeah.
but you're able to do this everywhere.
Yeah. Which is so
It
fun.
doesn't matter where you are.
Right. Yeah. I love
Really
that.
fun.
Yeah.
So I started noticing a difference with my clients, that I'm a little bit, we'll call it in the closet about.
Yeah. I
Go
love
out
it.
and tell everyone, believe it or not. I don't necessarily tell everyone who I just. What's ironic about this is I everyone knows I do energy work, so I have a lot of clients that I do energy work with. But the intuitive portion isn't something that necessarily I utilize. Just like
Mm,
in your stuff, probably just too. I mean, you're a therapist. It doesn't mean that you're crossing that over. I
right.
mean,
I
it's
mean, it's
natural,
hard to turn it off, but yeah, I'm not as outward with it with some of my clients. Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course.
Right.
So, part of what happened for me though is I had no problem just announcing. Like 2 days later, somebody asked me, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm a medium."
Oh my God. I don't know what happened. No.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
exactly. Like, oh wow. And then it was just 2 days after. And then of course we were talking about things. I'm like, well, this is what I do outside of just Pilates, yoga, energy work,
So good.
which I didn't even realize I was so blocked around that with particular people.
Interesting. Yeah.
For whatever reason. And guys, I know a lot of people watching this video are probably in the closet about their gifts too.
I'm sure. Yeah.
So if that's you, this could help you kind of come into your own, almost relax about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes like the fear factor off the table. Like whatever that deeper issue is, it's not really helping you right now. Let's just get rid of it.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
so that can come from a lot of reasons. Mine might have come from a childhood, situation where I was told that that was make believe, or,
Yeah.
people are going to judge you, or don't tell everyone. I hid. That was part of mine. It was hide.
Right.
And so that was something I didn't put together until we worked. And then I went, wow, there it is.
Yeah. Like not wanting to make other people uncomfortable with your gifts, something like that. Yeah.
So whoever's watching this, it could be for a reason you don't even know why. You're just nervous about talking about it because you're worried that, and it could come from when you were 7 years old.
Right. I also want to say too, like, everyone's different. So like Carrie's very obviously you're very in tune with your body. Like you can feel when you're literally like, I'm unwinding and and you were like moving your body and all sorts of stuff. Some people that aren't at like Carrie, they may not have the epiphany of like, oh, this memory at 7, oh, this memory at 4. They might just be like, I feel like there's this thing moving down my back and I feel really tight. And all of a sudden they'll be like, oh,
Yeah.
it's gone. You, and they don't actually have the memories come up. Like they just move whatever needs to move gets moved. And then that's the session. It's just energy moving or yeah. So I just want to say the processing happens very different for a lot of people.
I love the fact that you're bringing that up because when I first started doing Reiki and then transitioned to that energy work, or even intuitive sessions in the beginning too, and I'm
Mhm.
not sure if you experienced this. I'm sure a lot of people do, but the expectations
Yeah,
around,
totally.
well, don't feel it this way, or did you see colors? Did you?
Right.
And they're like,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
feel more relaxed.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that tightness in my chest is gone all of a sudden. Yeah.
So there may not be a clear understanding of where it came from or why it was there,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Just
In
to
fact, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Anything that you can do to relax the nervous system and open you up to whatever it is, I think is what this is all about. And even like in, well, Reiki, every person responds different to energy work, cranial sacral, all of it. But
Yes.
I was aware of it. I use intuitive movement also. I mean, I do movement almost every day, just like you do, some form of movement that helps the energy to move through my body. So I've been aware of it for a long time.
Yeah.
But this is part of what you're trying to do, Jess, is to make people aware or help people become more aware and in tune with their body.
Yes. Yeah. And, just to add to that, something that I come across not only in just, the embodied therapy that I do, but now in brain spotting is we all have something called like different parts. So those of you that are listening, you might be familiar with internal family systems, but like there, we all have different parts. Like for example, I have a teenage part, I have a young child part, I have a wise adult part, I have a saboteur. List could go on and on. And
Yeah.
those oftentimes they show up, but they're showing up to be integrated. So like the whole goal is to integrate these parts, which could also be from trauma that got compartmentalized off, and give them a voice and come back, be seen, and then they can relax or go away. And
Yeah.
to go even more, out there, like we have multiple lifetimes or, that are probably happening right now because time doesn't exist. And so sometimes we tap into those even, and they get to be seen and integrated.
Yeah. I think that's so beautiful too, because I always joke like the 13 carries,
Yeah, right.
the
Totally.
14 versions of me, like we all have these. And also we're, it's a good, from my perspective, all this stuff that's happening in the body. Okay, so I want to go into this a little deeper too with all these pieces. Part of it is about us integrating this into a fuller version of ourselves so that we can kind of feel what is. A lot of people, and I'm sure this happens with you, want to know the future.
Yes.
How often do you have a session and somebody says, well, I want to know what's going to happen? I get asked about politics a lot. It's kind of funny. That's a whole other can of worms. But
Yeah.
the energy, like, I want to know what's going to happen with this, or am I going to do this, or is this going to happen? But part of what the messages I get around that is it's difficult to be able to feel into the potentials of where you're going if you can't feel. Number one, if you can't feel.
Yeah.
Number two, if you can't feel what you're feeling now,
Yeah.
because what you're feeling now is what projects you into the future and then creates that potential outcome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if we're hanging on to all these pieces that are really oftentimes distortions about ourselves, and that I'm not saying that in a negative.
Yeah. They were created to survive on
Yeah,
some level.
yeah,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and they're based on a system or a belief and a structure that we then built our reality around. And so this is a lot of us think, as we hear a lot of people talking about the old paradigms falling apart and the shifts that are happening, and it's a whole, we are, in order to feel that, we have to feel.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
otherwise it seems like, because we don't, a lot of times we aren't able to see the positives, we'll say,
Yeah.
in our environment, because we haven't necessarily dealt with things in our body, our cellular memory, the child, like you said, or the saboteur, like all of those versions of us are there playing programs still,
Yes.
blocking us from being able to tap into our intuition.
Yes.
And we're basing our intuition is, we're thinking, basing it off of thinking.
Pretty much. Yep. Yeah, I also wanted to share a little more about emotions too, like why we are so afraid of feeling emotion. Like
Yeah.
the feedback that I've received is like, I'm afraid if I feel that, then I'll never come back from it. I'm like, it's not logical, but people really feel like if I go there and let myself be sad about this thing, then it's going to suck me down and I'm never coming back. And it's going to basically, it's like almost like a fear of dying or something that comes up for people if I feel emotion. And I just want to speak to that because I guess you could call it the science of emotion, is that if you don't attach a story to it, it's literally like 7 or 9 seconds that an emotion can even exist. So like brain spotting, for example, is like, I don't remember if I said this to you, but like when an emotion comes up, what I say is you're just moving through a wave, don't block it.
Yes.
So the reason that emotions, people just like, oh my God, shut it down. And then it's
Yeah.
like, but it actually doesn't ever get to go whoop, and then it goes away if we
Yeah.
don't But if you just don't want to feel it, it literally never goes away.
Yeah.
So that's, I don't know if that's helpful, but I just feel like to kind of like make people understand that emotions are meant to be felt, to be integrated, not to tank you and take you into a place of darkness.
Yes. No, I think that is so helpful. And I'm so glad you said that. It's
Yeah.
ironic because I had just had a conversation with a client of mine as well, talking about, and they're a very spiritual, just very lighthearted person. You know, they're positive, they believe in positivity. And they kind of acknowledged after I shared this story, you know, and they said, it's interesting because I have a tendency to put a lot of these feelings in a box.
Yeah.
And then I know the box is there, but I don't need to deal with it because I have, I've got this, I've got that. It's for survival. It's like
Yeah.
if I open that box up, it's going to take me down. I
That's
got
clear.
people I have to think about. I've got a family to care for. I've got a job I have to do. And so I think that's so important. We all do that, and myself included. When you were saying, it's just a wave, I was overcome at moments with just surprise
Yeah. Yeah.
of what is happening. Sorry, I'm in my office, which is my car. But it was kind of like, so this wave would come up and it would be very much I wanted to avoid it.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
called it squirmy.
Mhm.
I would get really squirmy and I would want to look away and change my direction and just be I was like aware of it, but it is true. It's like I don't want to deal with this right now because I'm going to start crying.
Yeah. Super normal.
It's okay to start crying.
Yeah.
And guess what? It's okay to keep crying.
Yeah.
And you might finish crying actually when you allow it to start in the first place.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then I will also like to speak to that. I'd love your feedback on that. Because I feel like maybe it can also be the other end of the spectrum where sometimes people hang on to these as part of, like you said, their story.
Their identity.
Yeah. Do you want to
Totally.
speak a little to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's where I think people get afraid of emotion is like, it's like they're afraid that that's going to define them. And so then they'll be living in that depression. And that's what I mean is where if we don't attach a story to it and we just let energy is energy, or emotion is energy in motion, right? So if we just let the energy of the emotion move through, it will pass. But
Yeah.
we can't, our ego wants to put a story to it. And the other tricky thing is the ego wants to put a why to it. It wants to give it a meaning, right?
Yeah. I was just going to go there. Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And if we're like, it doesn't really matter. This is just an energy moving through and an energy leaving. And where do I feel it in my body?
Yeah.
It leaves. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like well, and that's where the difference, sometimes, and I'm going to refer back to the talk therapy, I think it's so valuable and so important to a point.
To a point. Yeah.
And then it's like, well, what if you continue to talk about it, but you're not able to move that through your body? It's only going to continue to come up again and again and again
Yeah.
to talk about.
In like different ways too. It'll play out differently. And you won't think it's the same issue because it's with this person now or this situation now, but it is. It's just the same thing.
I love that's so valuable to bring up also. So on that note, when we're talking about these things, recognizing that this whew, so all of the stuff that's stored, not judging it, like not necessarily having to, like you said, attach a meaning to it. I tend to be very logical and analytical, even though I'm in my right brain a lot, right? I'm in my creative space, right? But I'm not necessarily, it takes work for me. It takes no work at all if we're in flow.
Right.
But having said that, as we allow these emotions, whatever it is that we're feeling in general, and I would just say in life right now, because maybe we can kind of end on this note. How much time are we good? Like for
Yep,
10 more minutes?
yep. Mhm.
Okay, cool. So we won't end entirely, but just taking this and branching this off into what we've got going on in everyone's lives right now. We're being rocked by solar energy, which I feel really antagonizes and excites the emotions, and it feels a lot like a full moon,
I
you
am
know.
constant full moon. Yeah,
Yeah, plus
totally.
the full moon.
Right, and that, yeah.
So we're being rocked right now, you guys. I know, for some people, by the way, the stuff that we're talking about is not woo woo. It's
No,
science.
yeah.
So all of the stuff that Jess does actually is science backed.
Mhm.
Actually, all the stuff that we all do has science associated with it. We just don't necessarily understand exactly how that applies to what
Right.
we do. But anyways, so my point is that we are all undergoing massive shifts at a quantum level, a physical, spiritual, emotional, all of it. So what I feel like is so valuable, I've already said having more tools for the toolbox, but also recognizing that it's good right now to be able to feel those emotions. And so maybe you could use what Jess said to me as an example. And how did you describe it? It's just a wave.
Just a wave. Yeah. Don't block it. It's just a wave.
Don't attach a story to it. You
Yeah.
don't have to know why all of a sudden you're driving one day and you just feel like bawling your eyes out.
Right. Right. We're in pigeon pose.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of people are having kundalini stuff, and this could be really valuable for that as well. So for those of you who are now experiencing like kundalini activations, holy
Mhm.
moly, I realized also this week, and I'm not sure if this is related to the brain spotting, but why not? Who knows what we
Yeah.
unlocked?
Yeah, for sure.
I had a kundalini awakening right around the time we met. You and I
Mhm.
became friends. I'd experienced a pretty big kundalini activation, and I didn't realize that that's still ongoing.
Yeah, totally.
It's kind of still going. It's like a rolling thing.
Yep.
So I'm sure people are experiencing that. And when you have a kundalini activation, depending on how much you have stored in your body, things get stuck, and things that you wouldn't expect to come up.
Yeah.
So if anything, this particular type of therapy or modality could really assist those who might be having some kundalini things or might be having intuitive stuff. They're not sure what it is that they're experiencing.
100%. Yeah, I actually in my training, we were asking if there was any contraindications, like people that shouldn't do this, and even people with seizures, they said it's fine. Like the science has said it's fine, and people with ADHD, or even with just going to put this out here, but we talked about people with what's called DID, dissociative identity disorder, or just like people that have multiple personalities. Well, guess what? That's all of us. We all have that, and that was part of this training, is understanding, like, everybody has that. Yes, some people are more on that end, but this type of therapy works for pretty much anything, which is
Yeah, and
cool.
to speak to that briefly, we all have moments where we feel like a different person
Yeah,
than we did. Why am I having these swings? This could help with that. Sometimes there's not a reason. It just is what it is. Let it let it fly, let it flow,
yep,
let it pass. This too shall pass. But I've worked with people who have multiple personalities, and intuitively, this is really interesting that you brought that up, because by the way, we're not downplaying or downgrading having somebody having an identity. What is it called? Multiple identities, or
yep,
um, that is a much, you know, it's more difficult to maintain in one particular, there's different variations. So when we say we have multiple personalities, well, that doesn't mean I'm going to be Carrie number 1 today and Carrie number 2 tomorrow. It's much more subtle. For some people, it's extreme.
Yes. Yes.
And so I have seen it intuitively as a house. I'll be shown the person I'm working with. I'll be shown a house, and I'll be shown a hallway, and I'll be shown all these doors and them in each room, and all kind of waiting their turn to talk.
So interesting.
And sometimes there's a version that I'll see with certain people where there's a version of them in a room. It's locked, it's dark, and they're screaming. Now, I'm giving this as an example intuitively because that would be an example of that particular person that's locked away.
Yeah.
I can see it intuitively. That might be part of what's causing their inability to maintain wholeness, we'll say. Let me rephrase that. Stability, maybe, in one particular main personality.
Yep.
And I would see this as being incredibly valuable for that, because that's the spot.
That's a spot. Yep. That's a spot. And yeah, brain spotting is like kind of, I wouldn't say geared towards that population, but it's basically to make it more mainstream that we all have different things that need to be integrated. That's all.
Yes. Yeah. And I want to say too, I've seen that in people who've had abuse and trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the stem, is like you have to have different places to go to feel safe. And that's where these different personalities develop from, is from trauma.
Yeah. And also I want to add one more thing to that. Abuse and trauma, there's levels and layers. For some kids, you know, some people go, well, I was never abused. But let's say you were 7 years old and your parents told you that you're not worthy, or you're this, or you're the reason we're getting a divorce. Who knows?
Right.
That is a form of abuse to that inner child.
Right. Right.
You know?
Totally.
And that can have an imprint.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
there's all ranges and all variations. It isn't just okay. I'm gonna pause just for a moment.
Okay. Sure, I'll pause.
We're double recording. Oh, good. Okay. So, all right. So we're gonna kind of end on that note. I mean, we could keep going on and on. This is such a fascinating topic, and it was such. So I'll just kind of share also. So this is like day 4 or 3.
Yeah.
So just it's there. I'm still having things kind of come up that are showing me that it just seems softer in some areas of my life.
Awesome.
So that's my experience. Other people might have a very different experience. I'm just excited for people to learn about it.
Well,
so do you want to share everybody? I'm going to put your information on the video for whoever wants to reach out to Jazz and do any of these sessions. She does intuitive sessions as well. I'm really not doing a lot of, I've got a lot of intuitive sessions I'm doing. I'm just not branching it out onto YouTube right now, but I will open that up at a later point. But Jess is available. Although you're pretty busy too. So if you are looking to connect with her, you might want to reach out. And how do you do that on your site? Is there a form? There's a form that you have people fill out, right?
I'll send you the link, but yeah, there's a form to fill out for I call it intuitive mentorship. So
yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, so much fun.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I thank you so much, Jess. I mean, I can't just, obviously you're just incredible, and I'm so grateful for you.
Feel the same about you. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
So we're having this love fest. All right, to be continued. We're going to probably do some more sessions, and we'll do some more videos too.
Sounds
Hopefully
good.
someone found this helpful and informative.
Yeah, it was super fun. Thanks, Carrie.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody, and thanks for tuning in. Namaste. To be continued. Yay. I'm gonna hit stop.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Bye.